platform leaders was set up to bring together people from different worlds, people who didn't always speak the same language, academics, practitioners, policymakers, but yet together they were shaping the future of digital platforms. And one thing we found was that some research was super interesting, but not used at all. Because when you read the research paper, it's quite complicated and nobody's really translating the insights of some excellent research that is happening in digital platforms and on digital markets. So we thought that we would try to do something about it. And last year, we had our inaugural academic prize that we gave platform leaders. And we're doing this again this year. So we had a jury.
We had a jury this year.
Please.
And some of the jury members are actually in the room. Lindbergh, do you want to show a hand? Yeah, exactly. So Lindbergh is the co-founder and the CEO of Fixter. We had Sandrine Zhang-Ferrand. She's the co-founder and CEO of Vinteria. And Samir Singh, who's a partner at Speed Invest. And obviously Benoit and I.
So what's quite unique about this prize is that we one of the key criteria is the relevance and the impact of the research in the real world for practitioners, and the jury is made up of practitioners. Now we are helped, and we would want to thank some of our friends at platformpapers.com, because these are the professors and the academics who sift through hundreds of papers and pre-select a number of papers for us, and then we decide the winner after a healthy debate. So we had 3 finalists this year, 3 very interesting papers. I mean, frankly, if you have time, each of these papers is excellent. The first one is when Uber eats its own business and competitors too. And this is really what happens when you're a platform and you launch something that partly cannibalizes your other side. So the drivers of Uber, suddenly some of them had to deliver things. So, how does that work? You deteriorate a little bit your service, but you have some other effects. So a very interesting paper. The second paper, more is sometimes merrier, demand spillover effects on digital platforms. It's a very interesting analysis of Spotify data to look at the impact of launching an album or a piece of music at the same time as a star, and some counterintuitive findings there. And the third paper was ban targeted advertising, privacy trade-offs, and app innovation. And this really was about something that also may sound a bit counterintuitive. You may think that banning targeted advertising for kids, I think that was one of the examples, is a good idea. But what actually happens is the quality of apps goes down because people have got less incentives to innovate, etc. So, trade-offs that are interesting to take into account.
And
the winner is...
This will hear me? No. And the winner is Dr. Manav Raj for his paper on more is sometimes merrier.
So part of the prize is actually we realize we design. This is not done with AI. I can tell you that this is the old way. We design a video that actually explains the insights of the papers and is designed to be viral and helpful for practitioners. So that's the video, and then we would be joined by the author from Wharton Business School.
Imagine you're an artist on Spotify. Your biggest competitor just dropped a new album. Bad news, right? Not so fast. In the physical world, when a big competitor opens nearby, they usually steal your customers. It's a zero-sum game. But platforms work differently. Take a look at More is Sometimes Merrier by Dr Manav Raj, which highlights important considerations when it comes to platforms and spillover effects. When a superstar releases music on Spotify, they don't just attract listeners, they expand the whole market. It's like they're baking a bigger pie, not just taking a bigger slice. The research found spillovers are biggest when 3 things align. First, a superstar draws crowds to the platform. Second, Spotify's algorithms connect artists through recommendations. And third, the artist is less popular and thus benefits more from discovery, like opening acts gaining fans at a headliner's concert. The takeaway? On platforms with low search costs and variety-seeking users, timing your launch alongside a star can triple your results. Proximity to power becomes a feature, not a bug. In the platform economy, sometimes more is merrier. The tide that lifts superstars can lift your boat too, if you know where to position yourself. And once again, the right platform design is key, since it can magnify this positive spillover effect to benefit the whole ecosystem.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Manav Raj, and I'm an assistant professor in management at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm thrilled to be here, at least virtually, to accept the Platform Leaders Academic Prize. And, I want to thank Benoit and Laura for organizing, as well as all the members of the jury. I was especially happy to hear the jury felt that my project serves as a bridge between research and practice. As an academic, we often are mostly in discussion with other academics, so it's very, very gratifying for me to be able to share my work with practitioners and also to hear that there may be some findings that are practically useful. The research project, as you just saw through the video, studies competitive dynamics between complementers on a digital platform and thinks about how platform architecture and actions can shape such dynamics. And I use the music industry as a setting with data from Spotify. The idea behind this project really stemmed from my own experience as a consumer, and particularly as a consumer of creative goods. Like I'm sure many of you, I primarily consume creative goods like music and TV shows and even books through digital platform interfaces like Spotify or Netflix or the Kindle store. And it seemed to me that the nature of platform settings may have changed competition across creative actors in these settings. And in particularly, it felt to me that platforms introduced a dynamic that complicates our traditional notion of similar peers acting as competitors. For each complementer on a platform, other similar peers could mean greater competitive pressure as they compete for attention. However, we all know that the more complementers on the platform, the more attractive the platform is, and the more consumers that then come to the market. And as a very simple version of this, I thought about when my favorite artists released music on Spotify. That new music would often draw me to the platform, but I'd find myself sticking around to listen to other songs by other similar artists. So ultimately, my thought is whether the effect of having a peer present on the platform or a peer active on the platform would depend on the size of these competing effects, the negative effects from substitution pressures, as well as potential positive effects from growth in the total size of the market. And to me, it was interesting to imagine whether these relationships that we often think of as competitive could transform into something that looked a little bit different. So I was able to study this using detailed data from the Spotify platform. I collected daily data on artist performance and activity across the top 10,000 artists on Spotify. And basically what I did is I investigated whether and when artists benefited when a related artist released an album. And what I found across the entire sample is that on average, artists saw increases in their streaming performance on Spotify following the release of an album by a highly similar peer. So put differently, despite the fact that we might think of these similar peers as competitors, on average, they would benefit from the presence of the other. But importantly, these effects were not uniform. So these positive effects, which are known as demand spillovers in my field, are larger when a more popular peer releases an album because they draw more people to the platform. So again, in the music setting, we can think of when Taylor Swift releases an album, there are massive increases in activity on Spotify that benefit the artists around her. But for the artists experiencing the spillovers, the effects are a lot larger for less popular artists who benefit more from consumers learning or being reminded of their existence. So again, if we think about Taylor Swift, we all know who Taylor Swift is. She's very top of mind for us. But for smaller artists that are swimming in her wake, these are big opportunities for learning and for attention. And finally, as the video nicely showed, the effects are really mediated by platform recommendations and architecture. The more Spotify's algorithms would push consumers from one artist to another, the larger that we would see these benefits. And to me, the most interesting part of the study was the practical strategic recommendations I was able to draw from it. We oftentimes think that firms should try and differentiate from their rivals. And, in the context of the music industry where I studied, this could take the form of producing distinct music that's kind of different, or perhaps finding release dates that are less crowded so we're not competing for attention. And one really salient example that I think is interesting is that if we go back to 2017, after removing her music from Spotify 3 years earlier, Taylor Swift returned to Spotify on the same day that Katy Perry's new album was released. And this move was thought to be motivated by a desire to hurt Katy Perry's performance because these artists were in this long-running feud. It was this big competitive interaction. However, if the relationship between these artists is not strictly competitive the way that my research shows, this kind of strategy may not have its intended effect. And in fact, in my research, I showed that on Spotify, artists benefit tremendously from releasing an album at the same time as high-performing related artists who generate these really large spillovers. So if we think about Taylor Swift and Katy Perry, despite the fact that Taylor Swift may have hoped to hurt Katy Perry by releasing music at the same time, it might have actually been a tremendous benefit to her. Taken a step further for complementers, this may also suggest that there are benefits to create music that mimics or closely resembles other superstars so that you're in position to benefit from the demand spillovers they generate, especially within creative industries. I think this is particularly interesting to think about implications for novelty and diversity of creative goods, but even across platform settings, if we're thinking about wanting a really diverse range of complementers, we want to be aware of the kinds of spillovers we're generating. And for platforms, that's, a huge important practical takeaway. The architecture and recommendations that we put in place play a huge role in determining the nature of intercomplementary competition. So this is important to keep in mind when we're thinking about, again, the range of products we want to have on the platform, which complementers we might want to promote or spotlight. And it can also be helpful to communicate this idea of a growing pie or rising tide when recruiting complementers to the platform to try and allay some of the fears about competition. So as I'm wrapping up, what I do want to emphasize is that, this research is context specific. You can imagine many kinds of platform settings where we don't value variety or the cost of consumption is higher, where demand spillovers may be less relevant. I think my findings are probably most directly relevant to platforms like Spotify or YouTube or Netflix, where again, we love exploring and trying different things, and it's relatively cheap to do so. But investigating how these kinds of spillovers may manifest in settings where substitution dynamics may be more prevalent would be fascinating as well. With all that said, I want to close by thanking the organizers once more. I'm really quite honored to be considered for this prize along these other papers and to be given it. And as I mentioned at the outset, I very much value connecting my research with practice. So if any of you who are attending would be interested to connect either about this project or to talk about other things on your mind related to platforms and digitization, please do feel free to reach out via email. I'd be happy to talk further. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.